All right, everyone. Welcome, 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 welcome. This is another episode of The Full Set, and my name is Dee Dee Delgado, and I'm your bodacious host. And I am here with my esteemed colleague, none other than Dr. Thema Bryant-Davis. Dr. Thema, how are you doing today?
I am doing wonderfully blessed and grateful. So thank you for having me.
Listen, when you said yes, I was like, look at me putting this manifestation out here. So,
That's it. Said knock
yep.
and the door will open.
Mm-hmm. I said, thank you so very much because, not that not that I didn't want to, I'm putting your Cash App and your PayPal link at the top. Not that I didn't want to be, in the negative, but I always try to operate as this is the thing that I want. I wanted you to come on the show. And then that was it. So I didn't expect anything else. Someone is saying with love and sending love from Detroit. So they got you. Everybody's holding you up in the light.
Beautiful. Thank you.
All right. So I just want to say welcome. I'm beyond blessed that you are here because we have some things to talk about today.
Absolutely.
Yes. And you look amazing. Are those cowrie shells on your shirt?
Yes, they are. And you look amazing as well, Queen.
My ancestors. Listen.
Yeah.
Oh, if y'all knew the joy I was experiencing today. Okay.
Yes.
So I want to, if it's all right with you, I want to go into your bio because I know that a lot of people follow you, but some of my demographic may not. And so I'm going to just read the abridged version of your bio so folks can get a real sure feel of who we talking to here.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Thema Bryant-Davis is a licensed psychologist, an ordained minister, and sacred artist who has worked nationally and globally to provide relief and empowerment to marginalized persons. Dr. Thema, a professor at Pepperdine University, is a past president of the Society for the Psychology of Women. Her contributions to the psychological research, policy, and practice have been honored by national and regional psychological associations. You earned your doctorate from Duke University, completed your post-doctoral training at Harvard Medical Center, and is a past American Psychological Association representative to the United Nations. If that ain't Black girl magic, I don't know what is. It gives me goosebumps just to say that. I'd lastly like to say that you've served as a mental health media consultant for numerous print, radio, and television media outlets, including but not limited to The Full Set. You need to add that there. The Huffington Post, the NPR, CBS, Oxygen, CNN, BET, TV One, Lifetime, and We TV. Dr. Thema, thank you so much for being a guest on the show.
Oh, you are most welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Oh my goodness. So I feel like let's get right into it. I know that an important part of your work is to encourage those you work with to tell their stories. So can you tell us, a Black woman with all of these accolades, can you tell us some of your story and what brought you to the work that you currently do?
Absolutely. So I grew up in Baltimore. So it's a powerful transition, yes, to go from be more, why be less when you can be more, to walking through the United Nations. And I will say that I carry the seed of my mother's hopes and dreams. My mother grew up in the projects of New York, one of 10 children, and had a dream and a vision for global ministry, for global impact. And so she raised my brother and I with that understanding and that commitment to not just the local arena, but to Africa and the African diaspora. So I grew up in Baltimore, a pastor's daughter. And that is
come on, PK.
Yeah. That's actually my entryway into psychology, because in our community, instead of going to therapy, most people talk to their pastor.
Correct.
And so growing up, people were always calling the parsonage, calling the pastor's house with their challenges, with their issues, with their struggles. And if my parents weren't home, that didn't stop people from talking. So people are just in need and needing relief. And it's interesting that even though my brother is 2 years older than me, I had such a heart for it that when people would call and were in distress, he would actually hand me the phone.
He'd be like, here, talk to your people.
Yeah, here, these are your people. And I do believe that while the training is important and the reading is important, I also believe that healers are in a big sense born, that it is a calling to be able to sit with people in the valley and not pressure them to make us feel better. So pretending to feel better because we cannot tolerate it. And so growing up, that was my early exposure to counseling, was actually pastoral counseling as a result of my parents.
I'm on pastoral care.
Yes. And then more specifically in psychology, my focus area is trauma psychology. And so exposure to trauma on multiple levels, growing up in Baltimore, of course, community violence, in the extended communities, the realities of domestic violence. And then when my dad became a bishop in the African Methodist Church,
AME.
Yeah, AME. Usually your first assignment is overseas. And so he was appointed to West Africa. And so we ended up moving there my sophomore year of high school, which was
what part of West Africa?
Liberia.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. And so
a lot of Liberians in Rhode Island.
Okay.
There's a big Liberian community here in Rhode Island. Yes.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. We have a good number out here in Los Angeles as well. So it's wonderful to keep that connection going. Before I left for Liberia, I spent my 9th grade year at the Baltimore School for the Arts. And I was a dance major. So that was another gift from my parents, is not only our culture and spirituality, but also the arts. And I will say dance is so healing and so therapeutic. Drama and poetry and all of those things give me life. And I grew up doing them regularly. So then we moved to Liberia, West Africa. And that was such an important time as a teenager, because getting a sense of who we are beyond like a few blocks in Baltimore, right? Because of course I was growing up, that was even like pre-Obama. So when people would say you can be anything you want to be, but you didn't really see that, it was powerful to go somewhere where everyone who was in a position of power looked like me. Like that is a totally different thing. So when we talk to our African and Caribbean sisters and brothers who come to the States, there is just a sensibility that you have when you have been had the opportunity to be in the majority. It's a different and I'll say as a girl child as well, to be affirmed for even my beauty. Growing up in Baltimore.
You better talk about it. I didn't know we was gonna go there, but you better talk about it.
Come on. Growing up in Baltimore, the closest you could get to European was the more beautiful you were. And then wanting to dance, there was this idea of like how your body had to be, that to make it acceptable as a dancer. What is a dancer's body? And so when I got to Liberia as a teenager, and suddenly people were like, what's your name? And I'm like, me? So it was really mentally, spiritually, culturally, physically, so affirming. And I actually found out later that when I applied to Duke University, my essay on living in Liberia is what got me in the door.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so you never know how things are going to work together. But when they're looking for, people who are going to bring a different vantage point or experience or perspective. So that was really powerful. And I have to say, it was a high, but there was also a low. We were supposed to be there for 4 years, which turned into 2 because there was a civil war.
Right, of course.
So as a result of the Civil War, we were evacuated. And that's also where I got in touch with this idea of privilege, of my privilege, right? It's one thing, to know about white privilege, but to recognize like the only reason I was able to get on that plane is because I'm a US citizen. Like there isn't anything more deserving of my life compared to those who were not given that opportunity. or that safety.
Are you saying that there was no like respite for actual Liberians, but because you were USA born, you were lifted, you were airlifted?
That's right. That's right. So literally I came home from school one day and we moved there with like 1 million suitcases and boxes because of the family of 4. And I literally came home one day and they said, you know, all Americans have to be at the airport by this time if you want to be evacuated. If not, we're not coming back for you, basically. And so we left with 1 suitcase each and having to say goodbye to friends and people I cared about.
Because you had been there for 2 years.
Yes. Yeah. And I actually, during that 2 years, I became Miss High School Liberia. So it was
Look at you. I told you when you got on the phone, you were shining. And it was because transitionally you were shining.
Come on. Yeah. So it was incredible, but it also, again, gave me that heart for trauma recovery, right? Okay. How do we heal? Especially when resources are limited, how do we heal?
Right. Okay.
So that's a part of my background of how I ended up in this field.
Thank you for sharing that. I feel like whatever kind of psychological counseling you do, I'd love to be there. I don't even need to be the patient. That story was just, I felt like I was there, you know? Yes. So thank you for sharing like a vulnerability with me because I think that that's important too. I wanted to ask you something about dancing. So you said that you were trained to dance or that you enjoy dancing?
Trained. Yeah.
And the reason why I ask is because then you made that very salient point about having a dancer's body, right? And so did you feel like that there were pressures to keep up a certain image?
Oh, absolutely. This idea, and let me tell you how the response to your body can be drastically different depending on where you are, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. So when I went to Liberia, and let me just say, Liberian food, African food is delicious, right?
It absolutely is.
So while I was there, I got thicker, and people who were Liberian.
Dr. Thema said thicker.
I got thick. I got more thick. Okay, the thickness was added.
Yes.
Okay? So, but what was funny was the Liberians would say to me, "Oh, Thema, when you came here, you were so dry, but now you're fat." Yeah. Yeah, that, you know, it was like an affirmation.
Right.
Like, you know, because also when you're in a place where not everyone has, to have enough, right, of nourishment, food,
right.
It is a status as well, right? And I've had other sisters who have said in the US they felt invisible. And then they go into other countries and people are like, now you are a woman, right? Now that's a woman.
Let me go home real quick.
You better come on. Look, they are there ready to sing your tribute. But when I got back to the States, so we were evacuated and I came back to the Baltimore School for the Arts in time for my senior year of high school.
Oh, you went to Baltimore School for the Arts. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And literally, can I tell you, my ballet teacher said to me that because of the weight I had gained over there, he could not even look at me at the bar. That he just would not even look, that I needed to do something about that. And so
fat phobic because you could dance, right?
Yes.
You didn't lose your ability to dance.
No, not at all. And while I was there, actually in Liberia, I began being a dance teacher. I went to take class and then they were like, clearly you're the teacher. So I'm like, oh, okay. So then I had like
Did you learn dances from there culturally? I was going to ask you. I was like, come on, each one teach one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Kennejaw Cultural Center is where I learned African dance. And one of the beautiful moments that happened there is we were sitting around after class one day and they were asking people their tribe and everybody was answering what their tribe was. And when they got to me, I said, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And they started like laughing because they couldn't understand my answer. And they were like, Black girl like you, how you ain't got no tribe? Mm. So then one of them spoke up and said, told them to hush and said, she's Black American. She don't know her tribe. And so this like moment that was going to be very sad became a competition because they all started.
They wanted to vie for they were like, no, you belong here. Look at her nose.
You're with us. They're like, you're Mandinka. You see her cheekbone? She Mandinka. No, she Bassa. She Bassa. So it was like this beautiful homecoming, right? All of it. And I, for me, that story is important to tell because some people who have gone to Africa from the States will say, well, they don't see us as the same or they're not accepted. And it's all the spirit you come in. If you come with humility and an open heart, then it is a really embracing experience. Is it identical? No, because we don't know, right, quote unquote, which one. But there is a real embrace and a love that I received that I was really grateful for.
Thank you so much for that. I'm like, I have tears in my eyes. I hate talking to y'all. Like, that is so beautiful. I wanted to ask you if you could give us, because you're such an amazing storyteller. Can you give us, no, listen, this is your show. Who am I? Can you give us some tips on how we can tell our own stories? I feel like a lot of us are blocked for like various reasons. Like, I feel like we maybe don't deserve to tell our story for reasons of what you shared. Like, oh, you know, the society sees you as this way, as dark skin, as you know, fat or not, you know, small enough for this presentation, or, you know, it's like hard to paint ourselves on our own canvas with our own brushes and hues. So what are some ways we can free ourselves to be able to truly tell our story?
Absolutely. It's such a great and important question. And the first one I would say is really about shattering shame, because what keeps me silent and censoring my story is my shame. And recognizing that transparency is actually contagious, right? Many times we don't tell our story because we think we're the only one. And then when we dare to actually speak the truth about what we have felt, what we have experienced, what we have lived, then you discover that even in your own circle, you are not the only one. And so each time we speak it, it becomes easier and easier. It's actually a cultural tradition. When we talk about historically, the Black church, they used to have what was called a testimony service.
Oh, some of them still do.
Some still do, right?
Yep.
So it's like this beautiful thing where actually there's a scripture that says, you know, one of the ways we overcome is by the telling of our story, right? That is so powerful. And so it used to be, and in some places still is, that people start off with first giving honor to God, who is the head of my life. And then they lay out this powerful story of like what they have overcome. And the reason for it is to be able to encourage other people who may be going through it.
Right.
So what happen now, I think, because of so much judgment and condemnation, now people wrap their story in metaphor. So they'll just say, I've been through a storm.
Right.
I've been in the valley. I've been in
I was going to say valley.
In the valley, you know, I've been facing a giant. Okay, like I love metaphor. I'm a poet, but there is something more liberating about plain speak, right? You know, if we can start to name what that is, of like miscarriage or sexual assault or intimate partner violence or abandonment or homelessness, or, you know, I was telling a client recently who was dealing with applying for graduate school and not getting in. I said to her, nobody ever asked me, what are the schools you didn't get into? Right? They never asked. So people assume that the success story is your only story. But, you know, there were doors that were closed. They were definitely closed, right?
You better come with that reframe. Okay.
It's like until we can start to tell those, then people think they're the only one. And it traps us in silence. So it's very liberating to start speaking it. And it also is to make peace with, it's a process. And you at all times have ownership of your story, unless people have taken your story. Okay. You have ownership of your story, and you can decide, do I feel comfortable in this moment? Do I feel like this person is trustworthy? When you're building friendships, I tell people, give them a piece of your story. And see, can they handle that, right? Not everybody can be.
Well, you build friendships.
Yes. I'm like, you're going to pour the whole thing out. Like, we want to know who we're talking to.
Right.
But getting the release and at the foundation of being able to tell my story is self-compassion, right? If I'm judging myself, if I haven't made peace with why did I do that? How did I end up in that circumstance?
Right.
Once I have clarity about that, then I can release the shame and the judgment and speak it. And also when I realize my worst moments are not the fullness of my identity, right? That's a part of my story, but it's not the fullness of my story.
Right.
So I can speak it. Yeah.
Yesterday you said, closed eyes don't erase wounds. Our lives matter. Yeah. Our pain matters. Our healing matters. And justice matters.
Yes.
I know a lot of your work is trauma informed. During this time in which not only are we going through a global pandemic that is affecting Black and Brown people at disproportionate rates.
Right.
We're still going through the little problem of racism, police brutality, living in a white, cis, het, capitalist, patriarchal society, as Bell Hooks says, right? And how do we... I feel like this is a repeat, Dr. Thema. Like, this is a repeat, and you know, people who might have years on me might say it's a repeat of 1992 with Rodney King. It might be a repeat of 1971, Charles Stewart. It might be a repeat of 1968, Dr. King, right? And so, like, we keep going through these cycles in which revolution and rebellion looks really different for different people. It's like, how do we all tell our stories without being angry at those we feel like we're leaving behind, or not being open to the fact that the reason why people may not come along with us is because it's very possible that they're at a spot that we were at maybe 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago, you know? How do we have compassion managing multiple people's stories? Yeah. Oh, is that a question, or is that a question?
You better come on. You better come on. Do you do this? Are you an interviewer? Come on.
Don't gas me.
Yeah, beautifully said and powerfully said. So a part of it is getting to a place where I don't need my perpetrators or those who benefit from my violation to agree with me. I do not need them to agree. I am not waiting for them to tell me my story is true, right? So when I get to that place, I become the center of my experience.
Right.
And we become the center collectively of our experience. So what that means is, I'm sorry, my phone keeps ringing.
No, it's okay.
All right.
We just gonna ignore it. You're gonna keep going.
That's right. Yeah, I'm moving. So what that means is, in psychology, there's something called a narrative approach. So in narrative therapy, you learn to become the main character in your story. When I am not the main character, then white supremacy is my main character, and all I am is a reaction to that.
Excuse me, you know how the Baptists do when they gotta go?
Yeah. One finger up. One finger. Say, hold my mule. Yes. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I reclaim my power. I reclaim my power over the story, that these things are all real, and they also do not get to author my story. So people and systems can write on the pages of my life, and they might write some things I do not like, but I also have the pen. So it is engaging with my agency, my power to tell my story. Then you said, how do we navigate the fact that people are living different stories? When I emotionally and spiritually mature, I am not so thrown off by people who are walking a different path. I do not need everyone to agree with me, to amen me, to be my clone. So the way I am able to operate with grace is also recognizing much of what we see is a trauma response. So some people respond to trauma with despair and depression. Some people respond with rage and with anger. Some people respond with numbness, right? So they're blank, nothing in the eyes. And some people respond to trauma with denial. So then when I hear people in their denial, I don't take it personally. I see them as traumatized, right? And they are trying to have control over a circumstance that is out of their control. So if I can believe it is not real, if I can believe it is not that bad, then I don't have to do anything, and that doesn't feel so bad to them. Yes. So, that was a part of the work that I also had to do as a sexual assault survivor, is that there are many people who engage in victim blaming. And especially as a survivor, that can be very hard to hear.
Right.
But when I recognize, like, underneath all of that is the desire to believe that we live in a just world. And if I believe we live in a just world, good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. So if something bad happened to you, you must have caused it.
Right.
So you must have, it's because you weren't following the police officer's directions. That's why they had to choke you.
Right.
It's because you wore a miniskirt. That's why you had to be raped.
And then these are the stories, speaking about compounded trauma, it can't just be your trauma, because then these are the stories that we tell each other and we promulgate to one another. Like, oh, someone said in a Facebook Live earlier today, well, Mr. George was using counterfeit money. And I'm like, what does that have to do with his life?
And come on.
Plenty of white people at Enron was out here spending other people money. You understand what I'm saying? And they all alive and well to tell the tale.
That's right. That's right. And that's when you realize it is not even about what people are claiming it's about. Because when you see the hypocrisy, as you said, and as we see, people are outraged about looting and not paying attention to the legalized looting of impoverished communities systematically. But
you came to preach today. I don't know if you a preacher kid or not. Like, okay.
Yeah. So, we speak the truth. And then also it's unfortunate, but in some ways when we become less surprised, right? When you hear people spinning the narratives, when you get to a place like you say, of course, right? It's like when they released the autopsy report and claimed, well, he had underlying health conditions, so we can't know if it was because the foot was on his throat, right?
Well, so I feel like he was walking down the street just fine. I mean,
right. Suddenly he would have just, fallen over and died because of his pre-existing conditions. So when we start to see that and know it, instead of being in a place of feeling hopeless or powerless, we can use that knowledge for strategy, right? So I know that people are going to do these types of things. So these are the things we can do to get ahead of it, to organize around it, to recognize it, to be able to call it out before they even do it.
I'm glad you said that, because it segues into the next question. And I just want to give a shout out to one of my besties, Alyssa Schechner, little white Jewish lady from Needham, Massachusetts, just wanted to she was like, I want to help you curate the show. And I was like, I don't have time. So shout out to her for giving me all my notes. I appreciate it. You once said on the Dr. Phil show that even in some of the most hellish situations, that oftentimes the human spirit will try to create points of light. So can you speak on that with regards to these recent events? Like, how can our community create points of light when every day something is taking the breath and life from us?
Yes. So it is an important component of, there's something called positive psychology, where we say not only focusing on pathology or illness, but on joy, on community, on love. Like, how do we do that? And that is a life skill that is especially necessary when you are a part of a marginalized and oppressed group, is learning to look for and to create and cultivate and protect your joy, knowing that these things are a part of our resistance, that rest is a part of resistance, loving ourselves and loving other people in a society where you're hated, that's radical. Right.
Right.
Meditation is a radical act of resistance to be a Black person in America sitting still. You better come on and be a one-person revolution, because since we have been here, our labor has been our worth. Our busyness has been our worth. And so we are constantly taught to grind, to lean in, to hustle, to have multiple jobs, because from a capitalistic perspective, that is our worth and value. But not recognizing some of us have stayed busy, not because we were well, but because we felt unworthy. That some of us operate from that place of perfectionism where we are never enough. And we hope if we can just list one more thing, that somehow we would not only be acceptable to other people, but acceptable to ourselves. So instead, we take what I like to call sacred pause, when I recognize it is holy for me to say no to some things. It is holy for me to step back. It is a sacred act of protecting my mental health, my physical health, my spiritual health, for me not to live on the treadmill, but for me to step away and restore myself. So looking for what are the things that you can do and that we can do collectively that bring joy, so we are not waiting for people to give it to us. The other piece I do need to say about it is you can have multiple emotions at one time. And when we don't recognize that, then we would say, well, how can I have joy when there's injustice? You know, how can I have joy when there are children in cages on the border? When, you know, Black men and Black women and our trans sisters and brothers are being stomped out. How do I, well, the reality is those injustices still give us sorrow and give us anger. And there is a way and a place for us to also be able to express and experience our joy. You know, I had a client the other day who was talking about, she received some really good news, and then she heard about all that was happening and felt guilty to be able to celebrate her own good news. And so we really, out of honoring our own humanity, need to do that, to be able to celebrate how we care for each other.
Right.
Our music, we're talking about club quarantine, right? So finding music in the midst of a pandemic, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. So we especially cannot afford to wait for all to be just before we have joy and love in our lives.
Because for Black folks, we'd be waiting forever then if we was waiting for shit to be just.
Come on, right? If I can't smile until there is freedom and equity everywhere, then it will not be in my lifetime. So it also being able to feed my joy and have community and connection, that gives me something to run on. Because if not, all of us have encountered activists or ministers or caretakers who are burnt out and bitter. It doesn't work. Like the justice work is long-term. So it is not sustainable for only my anger to fuel me. I have to have something else in me that gives me life and hope so that I can do, it's a marathon. This is a marathon.
You said you were a poet. And
yes.
I think about, you know, a lot of the pushback I get when I say the same things because I'm not published, you know, and so someone of your accomplishments, darling, right? And so, you know, how do you walk in that narrative of your own truth and say, no, this is what I do? Because just hearing you, like, I'm like, okay, I'll pick you up, tenants. Okay.
All right. You know, let me tell you what was so freeing for me. It was actually some wisdom from my mother, because what happened for me is people who encounter me in a particular lane, because they enjoy that aspect of me, they think that's all I'm supposed to do, right? So people would encounter me in like spoken word, and I used to do like slam competitions and all this stuff. They would say like, why are you like wasting your life in the academy when like you could be doing this full time? But then when people encounter me in psychology, they're like, why would you waste your time in poetry coffee houses when like this is your thing, right? And my mom said something that clarified it for me. She said, Thema, single gifted people will often misunderstand multi-gifted people. To them, you look scattered and they want you to choose. but you choose all of it. You choose all of it. And I said, thank you. I'm going to be all of it, because that is who I am. I do not have to choose.
I just want to thank your mom, because your mom just ministered to me as well.
Amen. Amen. Yeah. You know, we get pushed into these lanes, you know, for it to make sense to other people. You know, because when people read the bio and they're like, dancer, poet, singer, you know, psychologist, professor. Yep.
Yeah, I feel like I'm so glad you said that. And I'm not trying to put Genesis Barco says I needed this. And I feel like this is the only reason why I have these conversations. It was supposed to be one time a week, but there's just so many Black folks to hear from. I gotta do the labor. I have to. And it's a healing journey for me, because I learn so much from y'all every day. So I think about a situation in which a lot of my peers are all activists. I hate it, but a lot of my peers are all activists. Even my friends who are not activists, we've somehow siphoned their skill set and brought them into the activism world and was like, let's be an ally here. Like, you know, like my friend tonight who helped me with the questions, right? I'm like, do something constructive for me. Like, you know, so I think about that. And I think about how some of my friends say, when I get to, so this is a time right now where I could be too activism-y, but I think it's important for me to tell you this. And I say, when I say it, because I told you before, I feel like this is a repeat. We're on repeat. So this is the time that I would pick up the phone and be like, who needs an amplification on their protest? Who needs this? Who needs that? What I've been doing is asking myself, what do I need? And that, I think, is revolutionary in itself. And I bring this up because some of my friends don't like activism, Dee. Some of my friends that I met through poetry and through the slams and through the spitting hot bars off the top of my head, or you wrote that poem in 25 minutes? Absolutely, because I was that annoyed. Yeah. You know, you know what I'm talking about. And so I think about, you know, the tale of two Dee. Like, you know, here I am, this organizer that I have like a lot of organizational stuff behind my belt, but then I have the artistic side. How do you mitigate? Because I feel like people want me to either choose or strike a balance, but somehow, because the world is in balance, how do I, me, myself, or anyone who's watching, say, you know what, this is what I can do right now, and this is how I can show up?
It really is what you started with, turning the gaze inward to tune in to me, because the world will pull on us to do multiple things. And that was one of the things that was freeing for me. A good friend of mine, Rachel Potts, we had a women's retreat. And she said, just because you can do something doesn't mean it's your assignment. And I was like, wait, what? Because I was raised with this idea of anything you can do, if you're asked to do it, you should do it. Like you say yes to everything. And when you're a multi-gifted person, you will be drained and empty, and you'll have people pulling on you from a million directions, and you can end up losing yourself. And so what happens is there are times when we have lost track of a part of ourselves, and we have to go back and get her and reclaim her, right? And because there is limited time in the day, sometimes it's looking for those moments when I can integrate the different aspects of me, right? So at Pepperdine, I proposed to teach an elective on expressive arts therapy. And it was so great because since
it was like the psychologist is here too.
The artist is here, the psychologist is here, the teacher is here. And when I opened those doors, the people who came in, it was like all the healing artists, because it was it wasn't a required course. So I'm like, here they are, right? People who are studying mental health, who are visual artists and who are singers and who are musicians. And it was like, oh, like this is the best place ever.
Right.
So look for those places, right? Where the different parts of you can show up. It's really, really beautiful.
I appreciate you saying that. That just gives me so much clarity around like where I'm landing. And the reason why I asked you that was a precursor, because there was a protest in Boston last night. And even though I live in upstate New York, the community that cares for me, I have a few friends here, but the community that cares for me is where I was born and raised. So a friend of mine inboxes me, and it's like 7:30. She's like, I'm worried about you. I haven't seen you post anything to Facebook. I saw you drove to Boston yesterday. I was like, girl, I was not involved in no protest. I went to get some dick. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
there I am.
Mind your business.
No worries. I'm good.
I'm good, sis. But, you know, I was polite. But then I noticed that because people see me as activist Dee, they don't see me as the person who needs the muse sometimes. I have sticky paper all on my walls because now, you know, I'm in a little bit of a romantic rush. I've been writing and drawing on the walls. It's been amazing. So I just appreciate you saying that it's okay for us to not live in, even if we're experiencing it and feeling it, we can also honor our joy and our happiness when it happens. We don't have to feel guilty about it.
Yes. And to go with that, we can then show up refreshed. We can show up with our cups full. There was a place I was working on the East Coast before I moved here. And even though it was a counseling center, it was very toxic. And I know people overuse that word, but it was very toxic. And
Thank you for saying people overuse that word. Thank you.
Yes, they do. They do. They're like, everything's toxic. I'm like, no, not everything.
You would think people are just stepping on toxic waste all day. That's the way people talk about it.
Right. It's like, it's humanity, right?
Right.
It's messy. So one day I'm walking into the counseling center and the assistant director, she stopped me and she said, you always seem so happy. And I get the feeling it has nothing to do with this place. And I told her, you're right. If I was dependent on this place for my joy, I would be miserable. Right. So I do things before I show up so I have something to give. And so before you go to your next march, your next rally, you know, you got some love in your life, and then you can show up from that place of fullness, not just showing up in bitterness.
Yes. Yeah. I've been in such a good place. When you joined the call, I was like, hey, how you doing? And I'm just gonna revel in that. So it's a good place for me.
Of how do I have a glow in a pandemic? How do I not let them shade my shine? Right? I'm gonna be shining regardless. I said bodacious, juicy, succulent. I'm gonna be all of that in the midst of a pandemic.
There's a song I've been listening to. I know it's old, I don't care. And I listen to a lot of Afro beats, and I forget who the artist is, but the song is called Classy. And he was like, I'm a glow if I don't shine, you know? And I've been I've been meditating on that. Like I just walk around and I'm like, you know, so I appreciate it. I don't know if this is a sensitive topic, and I don't want to pivot too much because this is my second to last question for you. From your research to poetry slams to your academic journals, because you be out here writing, the APA representative to the United Nations, you better go on with your bad self. You better work. What was that like? To expressive arts therapy, much of your work actually centers around trauma and healing. So is there an action that we can take to start to reconcile with our past trauma? On yesterday's show, I realized that a part of security for me was my mom always picking out the overall set. And as an adult, I don't even own a pair of overalls, even though it's my favorite clothing item. And so I am making it my business to go to Etsy and find me a little overall short set, because I will be rocking it this summer, because I'm turning back into myself and saying, what things brought me joy? What joy was taken away from me as a youth, right? And what things can I bring back? Because I still sit with the memories of the things that was taken from me, but how do I sit with the joy as well? And so I want to ask you, what's one tangible step that someone could take today that would help them towards the road of healing? It's me. I'm the person that needs the help.
Yes. So one thing I would like us all to do before we go to bed tonight is to get up and dance. That is the one thing, because there is something called embodied healing. There are aspects that trauma affects that are beyond our mind. So in talk therapy, I'm addressing how I think and how I feel, but there is trauma stored in our bodies. So there's the book, The Body Remembers, or The Body Keeps the Score. And especially Black people, many times we weren't able to name or acknowledge our mental health issues. So instead of saying I'm depressed, we have migraines.
Right.
We'll say I'm anxious, I'm nauseous. We have body ache and backache and asthma. We have all of these manifestations, high blood pressure, because it's in the body. And so the way to heal what I have been holding, especially secrets. We have been holding secrets for generations. And that stuff, all of this, it's muscles tight here, forehead always crinkled, grinding our teeth at night. All of that is the trauma stored in. And so put on whatever is your go-to song, and whether it's slow dance or whether it's fast dance, to begin to move and release and reclaim your body and breathe, that's healing.
Thank you. So, I mean, are you taking new clients? What the hell? Like, I have a psychologist, but she white. I mean, I love you, Tracy, but she white, you know, she don't talk like you. What is happening? There's such a disconnect. And I don't think it's on the fault of Black women, right? It's not on the fault of Black non-men. It's not on the fault of anyone who is a POC, but there's really a shortage of like, understanding Black therapists and psychologists and any kind of mental health clinician, really.
Yes, it really is. And I'm one of those people that unfortunately right now I'm full. I'm thinking about putting together some workshops online so that more people, so I can share it with more people, but in terms of one-on-one sessions, I'm
sure. Let us know so we can push it out. I mean, you know, I got my little tiny 15, but they 15 strong. They're there.
Yes.
You know?
All right. Excellent. Yeah. So I would tell people looking at therapy for Black girls is an online directory. Melanin Mental Health is an online directory. Inclusive Therapist is an online directory, so that, you know, you can do the search for people who get you, who can affirm you. And if you are with a white therapist, you know, asking questions as you start about, you know, what are your thoughts about how racism affects mental health? And they should be able to answer that. And if they can't answer that, that's important information, right?
You're like, I'll put this in my change purse, please. Thank you. Dr. Thema, I've had such a wonderful time for you. My last question is this. It's a two-pronged question because I'm a complicated, beautiful person, really. Yeah. I can't wait to let you go, actually, so I can go dance with my boo. So listen, so I just want to ask you, knowing, and this is all in all seriousness, because this is your platform. This will be played on Apple. This will be played on Spotify, all major trending podcast series. But I want to know two parts. Is there anything that we left off, meaning something I as an interviewer did not ask you, or you were actually surprised, like, you know what, I wanted to talk about this project that I was working on and didn't get a chance to because of the way the conversation flowed? And two, who would you like to see on the show?
Oh, great questions. So I want to plug my homecoming podcast. It is Facilitating the Journey Back Home to Yourself.
Come on, I can't wait to subscribe.
And it's on iTunes and YouTube and SoundCloud and Spotify. And it has been such a gift of being able to journey with people who are reclaiming themselves. And even though it's the World Wide Web and I did the United Nations, I did not foresee how global the podcast would be. So it's such a gift to get emails from people all over the world who are also doing this journey back home. And in terms of someone I would recommend, well, first I want to say who we're going to list as for the Cash App, the donations.
Yes. It's a pinned comment. So those who are joining in and those who will be viewing later, please view the pinned comment. It's the Cash App is Cash App sign VVWI. And there's also a PayPal for Virtuous Woman Inc. at yahoo.com.
Excellent. So for Virtuous Woman Inc., they are just now opening in Los Angeles and will be the only group home for girls, only for girls who are exiting sex trafficking, which some people also call commercial sexual exploitation. Teen girls, and I'm going to be assisting them with the mental health component. But when especially we deal with trafficking, it's a wraparound intervention of needing to address housing and mental health and education and spirit and all of these things. And so if you would like to be a blessing to that new home, that would be wonderful.
We're gonna give 150 right now as soon as I get off the phone with you. So the Done for Dee team is going to go ahead and make a deposit, and also want to make sure that you're connected with folks in LA. I mean, I know you got your own connections, but I'm gonna connect you with Patrice Colors and Janiyah Khan, just so that way they can know about your project. You can go ahead and explain it to them, and hopefully we can get some rallying around that, because we are not a multi-issue struggle people, as Audre Lorde said. We have multiple struggles. And so this is important work, and I'm glad you shared it with us.
Oh, thank you so much. And that gave me great pause to receive the deposit of who I want to recommend that you speak with. And that is Crystal Jackson. And the reason I want you to speak with her is she's a philanthropist. And there are very few Black women philanthropists on a high level who are tapped into resources and know about how to connect resources with the community. Many of us are visionaries, many of us are artists, and our nonprofits are under-resourced and understaffed, and we are not compensated for our work and for our effort.
Right.
And so Crystal is really masterful in understanding finance and knowing there are wealthy people with a good heart, but who are disconnected from us. And so don't know where to make a seed that will have real impact. And so she has been a wonderful bridge for that. And I think that financial empowerment, that economic empowerment, is a part that we often leave off. And it would be a beautiful conversation.
I appreciate that. And I would like for you to put me in contact with her whenever you get some leisure time for yourself, that you're like, okay, I can set aside an hour for work. Just think of me, slide me in there.
I will connect you. Yes.
Dr. Thema, thank you so very much for appearing on this episode of The Full Set. You have been just such, I wouldn't even say a ray. I would just say you've been such an ethereal plane that has landed in my lap, and I appreciate you for you know, I'm a poet.
Come on, poet, speak.
I appreciate your appearance. I appreciate you sharing your story with us. T. Cherie just joined, and I had tagged her because she was a guest yesterday and was also talking about how much she loved narrative therapy. So I really encourage people who are MSWs, who are licensed social workers, to go ahead and get this blessing that you've given us today. Dr. Thema.
Thank you so much. Blessings on you for all that you pour out for other people. May it return to you sevenfold.
Thank you. And to you. I hope that you have a great evening, and I appreciate you for being on The Full Set.
Oh, thank you. Enjoy your bow and dance for us.
Yes, I will. I hope y'all have a good night now. Bye-bye.